In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use functional services in your website or app. First off, you'll need to turn on the Pro mode in the bottom left-hand corner of the website builder, and you'll see this panel called Services. And in here, we can create a new service. I'm going to call this a, let's just call this an article service. And I'm going to click Continue, and you'll see we've got this bit of a view component event bus, just a basic service that loads some articles. And I'm going to click the blocks. I'm going to search for the custom component block. I'm going to drag that on the screen, and here we've got a bunch of stuff spitting out the screen. I'm just going to get rid of that. We'll get rid of all of the other junk in here, and I'm just going to write a computed object, write a service. We'll just call it our articles, like this, and we'll return this $fluoro.app.services.articleService. And the reason why I know what that's called is because in our service over here, you can see it's called article service up here. That's the name that's going to be added programmatically. So in here, I can do things like this, where I can spit out my articles.items, and that should spit out all of the items that have been loaded from our back end, all the articles there. And we can also do some things where if I click this, I can just add a button saying reload, and we'll add another button saying change to 5, and add another to change to 10, and make one of us change to 2 and change to 10. And what I'll do is I'll add two click events to these buttons, and we'll go change 2 and change 10, and I'll add a methods object here, and we'll write change with the number we want to change to. We'll write this .articles.limit equals the number, and we should be able to click change to 2, and you'll see it changes to 2 articles, and change to 10, change to 10 articles. And what that's actually doing is changing the limit over here on our article service, which is global across our whole app. So that's pretty handy. That's a real basic example. Let's do something a little bit more interesting. I'm going to click over here, back to our custom component. I'm now going to click back to services and go back. I'm going to add another service. I'm going to call this the selection service, and we'll click OK. And for the selection service, I'm actually going to get rid of this stuff as well. I'm going to write a data function just in view. I'm going to write selected, create an array. I'm going to add a methods object as well. I'm going to write toggle. I'm going to do select. I'm going to add, what else do we need? Deselect. And I'll write a method called isSelected. And for each of these, I'm going to pass through an item, just like this, item, item, item. And for toggle, I'm basically going to go if this.isSelected item, else, and in this part, I'm going to write this.deselect. So if it's selected, we want to deselect the item. Otherwise, we want to this.select the item. And over here, we need to check if it's selected or not. Now for that, I'm going to do a computed object, and I'm going to write a hash. I'm going to return this.selected reduce, and I'm going to have my set or memo bucket, the item, and the third argument's going to be, the second argument's going to be an object. In our reduce, we're always returning our data set, and I'm going to get the ID of each of these objects. So for that, just so that I get the scoping right, I'm going to write self equals this, so we're outside of the function. So with this, and I'm going to use the self.fluoro utils.getStringID. So we get the ID of the item. So var ID equals the item ID. And I'm just going to write set ID equals true. So that will give us an object that looks something like this. A is our ID, would be true if it's selected. B would be true. Basically, it's always going to be an object which we can just quickly check what's selected or not. So in here, we're going to is selected, return if this dot hash the ID, and I'm going to get the ID of the item we're checking, equals this dot fluoro dot utils. Oops, if I can spell properly. Get string ID. Going to get the item. We're going to get the ID and then check is it in the hash, and this hash will constantly be updated by view if we've selected it or not. And select over here, we're going to do this dot selected, which is our array. We're just going to push the item. Deselect is going to be this dot selected dot splice, and we need to find the index of where that item is in the array. So we're going to go index equals this dot selected dot index of, get the item. If the index for some reason is -1, we're just going to return because it's not in the list, so we don't need to take it out of the list. And here we're going to do splice from index with 1 ahead like that. And now we've got our selection service. Now we could do a bunch of other things like just add a deselect all method where we go this dot selected equals just an empty array, something like that. And over here now in our component, instead of having a pre where we just have all of the articles, I'm just going to do a v-for loop. I'm going to go item in articles.items, and then over here we can write our item.title, so you can see all of these down here. And I'm going to add a click, and we're going to write toggle, but instead of doing that, I'm going to write selection service dot toggle. I'm going to pass through the item, and over here I'm going to add our selection service here, and our selection service is going to be this dot fluoro dot app dot services dot selection service, which is that service we created before. And what we want to do is toggle that, and just to see if this is working, I'm going to add a pre. I'm going to do selection service dot selected, which should give us an array, and as we click these, they'll get added or removed from the array if we toggle them. And just for an extra little nice thing, I'm going to add a class, a dynamic class of selected, and we're going to pass through selection service dot is selected the item, which means that as we click these will get a class of selected or not. And I'm just going to add selected in our CSS, background of black, and a color of white, and you'll see it working already. But as I click these, they're added this to our selection or not, to our selection service, and there we go. That's how we can use functional services. So the services over here are global. You can use them across the app, so you can use them to load things from the back end. You can use them to just store reusable functions, or you can use them to filter and other utilities. But they're really handy if you're building complex or monolithic large-scale apps and websites. Thanks for watching.